Hey guys, welcome back. This week we will be working on trying to do some technical work. This will be really touch and go because it's something I haven't really done in a while. The last time I hit a miniature with the water texture, Vallejo water texture, it's amazing shit. If you don't have it, you really need to get it. It's a good chunk of how I do my water effects, like the river that you saw on the Wood Elf, which you can find on our YouTube channel. You can find pictures on Instagram as well as Facebook as well. It does amazing stuff to make things look like they are dripping. And I mean, there are plenty of people that do this with UV resins. I don't have those, and I haven't really tried them out yet. But I mean, in the future, I'd like to, just to do like blood trails and stuff, because it does have that thin consistency that looks just right if you get the color right, and I really like how it turns out. But when it comes to a dripping water effect to make something look like it's actually coming off of it but still close to the character itself, I have found that water texture works really well. I once painted a Cthulhu-esque creature for my dad, and then there's actually one that I put up there for a commission that you can see on the base where I used the water texture to actually give the water waves on the bottom more more texture, no shit, and to actually look wet without, having to go too crazy on the paint job. Still turned out amazing. You can find that one on Facebook. The Cthulhu, on the other hand, don't have any pictures of. That was my mistake. I painted that quite a few years ago, but it was still turned out really neat. There were plenty of moments where, like, there were water droplets falling off of the arms and whatnot, and especially off the tentacles, so it actually did have the right dripping look that I wanted without having to go too far. If anything, you just have to build up or move the water texture in the right direction. Sometimes even using a little bit of a Q-tip, like I showed with the Wood Elf, again, for making waves. You can do the same idea to make water look clumped together while still falling in one direction. So there's a little lowdown on that. For today, my commissioner did want the wet look to be added to the character, and initially he was trying to figure out how we could put the slime on there. And I told him straight out, hey, if we do the color slime like I did with the rest of them and I just painted over top, it's gonna be a shit ton of work on top of it. And I mean, he is paying me pretty nicely for this one, don't get me wrong, but it would almost certainly wind up just getting lost in the paint job current, because I mean, it's pretty detailed, and adding the green in there, sure, there'd be moments where you could really have that pop, but at the same time, you're gonna lose it, especially back here where it's darker, because the green's gonna mold in with the blue just so. So I told him I'd give the water texture a shot. What we need to test out first before we put it onto the character is how to get it the color of the slime, because I'm not going for just a wet water look. I could do that nice and simple, and it would work for what happened in the movie. As you can see here, if we really close in, enjoy, you can actually see the slime trails coming off of this guy as they are just kind of slowly moving off the skin. There's droplets on the arm, it's here on the hands. It hits everywhere. And I mean, especially where the monster has changed his anatomy just so. To keep it congruent with the other paint jobs, I am going to do the slime in the green color that we did before. Here's the thing though. Adding the opaque paint to the water texture is going to be like applying the paint, just thicker on top. Because this is a thick texture, it dries transparent, yes, but it's not going to have the same watering down effect on the paint as it would otherwise, as far as I've been able to figure out before. So my plan is just like we do for a water effect on a base, for instance, again, setting up the river scene, I'm going to tint the water texture with a color close to the slime color that I've used before and see how that works. And this is going to be very touch and go, so I don't know how long this video is going to be. I figure if we end up ending early, I might do a little bit of an unboxing video, just because I have other commission stuff that has been sitting around and I have not even looked at it. And I told the next guy that I would be working on his stuff in January, so we're getting up on that time. It's coming up close. So, we might look at that later today. We'll see what happens. So, focus on what we're doing now. Things I have to work on this. I have my usual toothpicks, because they're going to help with... Sorry. I have a sinus infection. One last little fucking hurrah from my little job that I no longer work, thank fuck. I'll be starting a new job in January and I cannot fucking wait. Which, quick heads up, we will be changing our schedule probably come January 9th. That's when my next job starts. I don't know exactly what we'll be looking at just yet. My plan is to possibly do streaming after I get home from work, because I'll be getting home ridiculously early. I love this new job's hours are great. Because I have 2 days off in the week, I figured it would be easier to probably stream somewhere in the middle of the week. Maybe one weekend day, we'll see what happens. Yeah, it might be a little touch and go while I figure out my schedule, as well as what days will work out better. Unfortunately, Wednesday evening is already taken with a thing that I've been doing for literally over 3 years. So that's... Wednesdays are going to be out. I'm looking at possibly Tuesday or Thursday, hitting it up in the evening, maybe Friday. I'm kind of touch and go on that one too. But anyway, I'm not much of a go out and drink person unless people invite me, so... Anyway, we'll figure that out. Look out on Facebook and obviously on my page here, because I will be redoing the schedule when we get closer to. I'm thinking right now definitely Thursday evening, as it's kind of a me day anyway. Anyway, so we've got toothpicks for mixing, we have the Q-tip to tear apart and possibly use if we feel like we need it, and then I've got quite a few brushes that I have absolutely beaten the shit out of. Do not use a good brush for this. You use a good brush for your water texture, you had better go clean it off and clean it freaking good, otherwise your brush is fucked. So do yourself a favor, have some beat 'em up brushes, maybe a palette knife, or even some sculpting tools that you can clean off easy and have a way to clean them off right next to you. I have a towel over here on the side. It's actually more like a rag, but either way, it works. Definitely have it there with you. Should I have some water for this? I don't really feel I need to. And most of these have droppers if I don't have the dropper myself. So I mean, that's the only thing maybe I could clean is the dropper, but I'm not super worried about it, obviously. Also, new camera angle, you are literally right over my shoulder, so sorry if I get in the way a couple of times. This is gonna be a little messy, but for the meantime, we don't need these pictures up, so for once, enjoy a full shot of my desk. You know what I forgot is that my microphone's not attached to this specific setting on OBS. So I was just talking into the ether for a second there. Anyway, this is my work tile. I use it whenever I'm doing literally anything now because I have one of those nice game pads underneath for my desktop. Because I just like it better. I can move shit around and it's not going to get messed up and I can have my mouse anywhere I want and we're good to go. Anyway, the tile is here to protect my desk as well as to be able to work on this a little bit easier. Because I'm going to just do it right here on the tile and maybe clean it up with the rag if I need to. We'll see what happens. So what I'm thinking is, for our mix of the slime colors from earlier, we had, and I wrote it down, it was an army green with wizard orb, into witch brew, and poisonous cloud. So poisonous cloud, I think I can get the same color by using the ink if I need to, but I want to try the, what's this, Athonian camo shade. So I do have quite a few different green shades. Obviously, I use my shit quite a lot. There's the Bealtan green and there's the Coelia green shade. The green shade is more of a blue. So I'm thinking if the camo shade doesn't work, I might be able to add one of these two in there to get more of the color that we're looking for. And if needed to, we can do an extra layer of a lighter color on top. Again, this is where it's going to be very touch and go, because I'm not really sure what's going to have an effect and what's not. Real quick, I forgot to figure out how Discord can shut the fuck up. Give me a moment, please. I think I figured it out. Okay, I think we're good. Alright, because I knew that was bothering somebody else last time. Any hoodles. Back to. Alright, so the first thing I want to try out is definitely the camo shade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small amount of the Vallejo, put that on a clean spot of the tile, which yes, I know my tile's kind of a mess. Probably should have cleaned it, but didn't. So I'm going to just take a little scoop. I'm going to smack it right there. And this stuff does dry clear, like I was talking about before. It looks thick beforehand because it's this white, but that'll honestly show you how much off the base, the character, whatever the fuck you're doing it on, that will be. So I'm just gonna dip my toothpick straight in there and just mix it straight into the water to see what happens to it. So it's creating this interesting... That would look neat for a swamp, not gonna lie. Now, it just depends on how this is gonna dry, because I have no feckin' idea. But that's what it looks like right now. As far as testers go, I did not think to actually have something to test this on. Shit. I did, but I didn't bring it over, so you know what? Got one of my test palettes over here. I'ma just throw it down on a test palette. Actually, I think I got a clear white one. Memento 44. Ooh. Okay, no lie, I was doing test paintings at one point for pour paintings. They are fun. I do have a whole bunch of different sized stuff just because of it. Also, anybody who ever sees this, if you ever want to see how to do pour painting, I can give a tutorial. I think that would be pretty fun. Haven't done that in a while. It actually does sound like a lot of fun. There was one painting I had that I was going to redo as a pour painting, because I had the painting underneath wasn't bad. It was a painting with intention with some wicked friends of mine, and I don't know, don't feel like I need that painting anymore, so I was thinking about redoing it again with the pour paint just to see how it would turn out. Oh god, that looks like snot. If it dries that thick, now I know how to make snot. Oh, this is the fun part about experimentation, man. You never know what's gonna come out of this shit. Alright, gonna wipe my stuff off real quick, and we're gonna do another test swatch while that one dries off. So I'm, again, just gonna take a small amount of the water effect. Just gonna lightly place the cap there. We're gonna do the Coelia green shade, see how that turns out. I'm just gonna do a test swatch of each, I think. Unless I find one that I think has the right look. Okay, that's pretty neat. Got a night sequence, that might work pretty well. You could obviously just throw the testers here onto a white sheet of paper, see how it turns out. I would not suggest anything black, because you won't really be able to see it all that well. White's going to show you the color that it's going to look like clear through other things. Obviously, putting it on top of other colors will have a different effect. But, that'll be easier to go over when we actually work on something again. Like what you saw in the Wood Elf video, a lot of times it's all about how you set up the underside of the water, and then you add the epoxy to it. Colored epoxy will cover over it pretty nicely, but sometimes that's not the effect we're going for. Oh shit. Okay, so duly noted, the Bealtan green is a really nice kind of bright green in there when you add it with the water effect. Oh boy, that's thick too. Wowzers. That's more like an ooze. Kinda dig that though. And I'm just kind of plopping it on there, no care in the world. What I am doing is setting up some drag spots, which will show me what it looks like thin. And then there's the thicker spots, which will show us, obviously, where it's going to be thicker, so for, like, the drip areas. Because that's what you're going to do, is you're going to build in the opposite direction, so that it looks like gravity is pulling it down. And then for the ink, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to add an even amount of the cyan and the yellow, which should make that bright green. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. And then I might go ahead and test out the paint with the water effect and see how that turns out. Which it might just act like a gloss medium and wind up just making it look super glossy. But, again, not sure, never done it, so let's find out. I've had some experience with this stuff, but I haven't really done this before. Mix up our ink. Pop that over there because we've done it already. I only need a small amount of each ink. These are acrylic inks. So I don't know how they're going to affect it. Yep, the yellow's having the same issue most yellow does. There we go. That's much better. Okay. Yeah, see, that's gonna get us more of that poison cloud look. I think if I added a little bit more yellow, that would probably make it even better. And you can see where some of the thicker parts of the ink pigmentation is sticking. So this definitely takes a lot more mixing. but comes up with a very vibrant color. And the spread's pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna clean off my desk real quick. So that is much nastier than expected. And then we'll go ahead and give the paints a try, because if anything from that ink is showing, it might be too thick even with the ink, and we might be stuck using, even if we did something more along the shade line, we might still have to thin it out with the airbrush thinner first, which, if I had to guess, that might be what we wind up doing, because even the top one is starting to dry, and it's not getting that same transparent feel. The thinner parts that were kind of scraped off onto the palette are, but they still leave very thick trailing. This might be interesting. So you know what, let's go ahead and give that a shot. Let's go with, which one will we do? I kind of want to just go with the brighter side of the slime, because anywhere where it's really thin, it'll look like the yellow on top of it. I'm sorry, the yellow that's underneath it. So let's go with the Poison Cloud and Witch Brew. Play the maracas for a second. And I'm going to take just a small dot of each. Yep, just like that. And then I'm going to take the airbrush flow. I'm going to put that into... I've got a small ceramic palette next to me. I'm going to go ahead and put it over there and try dropping just a little bit into this. Okay, and this is making it thin enough to where we can actually see the tile underneath. I think that's what we need to go for. So that when the slime... Hello, Vinny. When the slime actually does its thing, hopefully it'll dry to a point where it's this translucent. What you doing, Bubba? Oh, my kittens. Baby's feeling a little lonely today, huh? Yeah. If you get closer, I can pet you. You keep flopping across the room from me. Alright, we got some of our water effect. Let's just go ahead and straight mix those two in together. Okay, so this is creating a different color. It's not quite the bright green because of the Witch's Brew being a little bit more of a gross color. So I think if we do this again, I might just do the straight Poison Cloud. Let's go ahead and clean off. Shit. So far, I'm thinking all the other consistencies aren't quite thin enough. The shades come pretty close, so I think our booger trail, because that's definitely what that is. Oh, my dad would get a kick out of that. That'll probably wind up working out better. So, let's see if the camera can catch that. Great. So that's our testers. They should start drying off pretty quick. This stuff, I'd still tell you to let it cure for about 24 hours without touching it. Majorly because anything you do to it during that time can actually move around. But to be completely honest, about 4 hours in, and it's usually pretty well cured. It just might be a little tacky, which again, why I would suggest not working around it just yet. Let it dry completely and then you're good to go. So the shades, I think, not quite the green we need. This third one here, the Biltan green, is the closest. I feel like that looks a lot like our deeper green sets for what we did on the paint job. But if I'm going to go with a bright green, our inks have the better coloration. But given how this turned out here, with the paint and the thinner, I might be able to just get away with doing that. We're just going to have to thin the shit out of it. But duly noted, that makes a great booger, so if I ever do like some Warhammer Demon armies, I can definitely do that to give a grosser look to things. Or even some orcs and goblins, let's be honest, they could probably use some of that. Make a snotling literally covered in snot. And it's already starting to dry with that glossy effect on it. The only thing is, it's not very thin. So I'm going to go ahead and mark these so I know which one's which. This will help me in the future when I decide to do this again. I have these to just go ahead and look back on. And this way I know what colors I mixed in for these or what was used. So now they're clearly labeled so I can use it for later. And I will actually keep this palette. Just so I have how I did it for next time, and in case I ever feel like doing a slightly different look to a water effect or adding this onto another character, I now know how to do it again without having to do too much looking around or trying to remember or reviewing these videos, which I could do, but I'm lazy. This is easier. Anyway, so what I'm thinking is, I'm gonna try a 6th one, which is gonna wind up being just a poison cloud. And I'm gonna try adding more airflow improver to it to see if we can get it even thinner and see how that turns out. So I've got my little tip worth of paint, literally just the tip. Stupid jokes for stupid people. There you go. Not gonna lie, those are my kind of jokes sometimes. I probably should have just taken that cap off. What am I doing? I'm gonna add. See, we did 2 last time. I'm gonna go with 3 and see how it turns out. And that is already turning out a lot lighter. I can still see the tile underneath it. Okay, which I dig that a lot more. I think that's going to be a better consistency. So let's go ahead and add some of the water effect to it. Trying to grab a fairly good amount here. And then we'll mix it in. It kind of almost looks like egg. It's interesting that that paint turned into such a yellow, eggy looking consistency. So that is not any of what I thought would happen. I might have done a little much on the water effect, but that's okay. Go ahead and clean off our tile, just so I have a good spot to work on. But from the looks of things, I might be able to add a mix between some of these to get the effect that we really want to go for. So let's see, that one was straight poison cloud. And that was AF 3 drops. 2. I mean, pre-dried that even has a very, like, whipped egg consistency. Which I just kind of find fascinating at the moment. And that's thin enough on the thin parts here where it's just dragged out by me. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Where I managed to drag it out, and you can see it especially on this one, but the places where I managed to drag it out here, it's almost completely clear. That's what we're going for, because I need the paint job to really show underneath, while still having the thick consistencies have more of the color. So we might end up doing that. Only thing is, we need to test that out with the ink to see if it'll have the same effect, because currently I'm not getting the right color from the paints. I don't need an egg color. I need a green color, because that's what the other guys have, and I'm trying to keep them consistent. So, let's go ahead and try the ink mixed with the airflow improver, and then see if we can get the same consistency, because I mean, right here where you get the thinner parts of that one dragged out are not bad. It's just, as you can see with all the rest of them, as it starts to dry, it's not getting that clear consistency. It's still very thick with the color. Which, if that's what I was going for, like a blood effect, that could work really well. Now I know, and I can do it again later. But that's not what I'm going for. So let's go ahead and try out number 7. Which is gonna be ink. And AF, and we'll figure out the drops, so that I know how many drops I need to use in the future. So let's go ahead and start off with our color. Gonna get just a little bit of the yellow. Let's focus back onto the palette real quick. We'll get the blue. Okay, we got the right color. It's literally a half and half mix of the both. I don't really need to put how many of one or the other I did. If I do just the cyan / yellow, I know I mean half and half. So let's go ahead and throw some airflow improver on there. That's about 2 drops currently. Still pretty thick. So let's go ahead and go with a 3rd drop. And that's still proving to be pretty thick with the pigment. So I'm going to try a 4th. And yeah, that's getting it. Okay, so our one issue is it looks like there's some chunks of pigment in there. That might just be because of the ink consistency. But we'll see how that turns out when it dries. I like that already because you can see the tile underneath it where it's got the thick parts have more of the coloration. That's what we're going for. So let's go ahead and add the water effect. Okay, that should be more than enough. takes a little bit more mixing. It doesn't want to hold the pigment as well. Might be because of how much we had to thin it out. It's also turning a little bit more blue the more we add the water effect in there. So duly noted, we might need to add more yellow to keep it from doing that as we add the water effect. Okay, so that was 4 drops of the airflow improver. Okay, and as we can see with the top ones, they are starting to dry. Let's go ahead and refocus. They are starting to dry a little bit already, so you can see how they're starting to go with the consistency. Like up here, we still hold on to a lot of that color when it comes down to the thinner parts. So even here where it's spread thinly over top, you still have the Buell-tanned green. Which, not bad, but not exactly what we're looking for. Whereas for this one, hold on one moment. Sorry, dude. Here we have it spread out thin for the Coelia. Again, grabs that color, same with the camo. So if I was looking for a thicker consistency, those might work pretty well. Since it's not really what I want to go for at the moment, I don't think I'm going to be using those. This one, as we can see, even where I spread thin, that color holds on really, really well. So the ink is a good one to go for if I'm going for a very thick. So if I was going for like watered down mud, I could totally do this with like the sepia tone and add it to the water effect, and it would get this same look and look pretty cool. And still have that great effect to it. And it keeps that color incredibly well. As you can see in these parts where it's starting to dry a little bit, like, yeah, that Buell-tann is dry. I am not so sure about that. That looks pretty wet, but... oh, that's pretty fucking dry. Alright. Even this part that's dried out, it squishes a little bit underneath my fingers, so the inside of the bigger part is not completely dry yet. That's normal. It takes a lot longer for the thicker parts to really dry out. It's holding that color, like, bang on. So if that was what I was going for, that's what I would do. It's not. I'm trying to go for a thinner consistency that will dry out a lot clearer. So, not going to use just the straight ink. Duly noted that I could make some really cool wet mud effects with that if I wanted to. Or even a really neat ice effect, depending on how I did it. Anyway, so the straight paint is doing pretty much the same thing. It's holding on to those pigments really well. It's not quite as dry. Well done, Molly. And now you can see where my finger was. Anyway, but it does have a pretty neat look in the dragged out parts. Iffy. These guys will be waiting on for a few more minutes before they're actually dry. So we'll go ahead and give those a little break. We'll clean up for a second here, because I'm definitely not going to be using these. Though they were cool, they are not what I need. Okay. We'll see which one we wind up using. So I'm not sure at the present moment. Both colors are a little bit less than what I need, but they're still interesting. I'm definitely thinking if I do the ink, we'll have to add much, much more yellow to keep that green color versus with the straight paint, that's a little rougher. It's very, very yellow at the present moment. So I'd have to add back more blue. But it muted the color so much, I'm not sure enough of the original color is there in the first place. Whereas the cyan yellow ink, that's a good enough mix of the colors that we were using beforehand that I could totally get away with using that, I think. So let's go ahead and pull out one of its buddies. And yeah, the moments where I have the ink running down, or I'm sorry, the green slime running down the skin looks incredibly like number 7. So the bottom of the palette here. I think that's what we're going to wind up going with, because that looks a lot better. So let's see if it actually dries at the consistency I need, and then we'll move on from there. If it doesn't, we'll give it another shot, another test. I'll probably put it right up here. And that'll be a much more watered down version, or thinned out version, to see how well it goes. Dry faster, damn it. But the reason why we're going to need the test brushes is I could throw it on there with the toothpick, but I'm very likely to scratch off my paint job, which would suck. So we're not doing that. What I will do is, if I need to, I can mix it using the toothpick again. And I honestly don't think I'm going to need the Q-tip, because it's such a small sculpt. Anything I put on there should grab wonderfully well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my beat up 10-0 brush that is honestly very, very close to death, and I'm probably going to kill it today. So we're going to go ahead and use that beat 'em up brush to apply the water effect with. And then that will be done. And that one will allow me to have more control over it. If I grab a smaller amount of the water effect, I'll be able to spread it a little bit thinner. So for instance, working on the arms or on the very edges of the hand, I'll be able to put the smaller amounts on there. Or I can grab more with the smaller brush and smack it across wherever I want. It'll turn out a lot thicker, and I can drag it more using that brush anyway. Whereas these smaller brushes, I can only do so much. But y'all are close to death. So you're going in a different cup for now. Coffee and water. Coffee for the brain, water for the body. Because hydration is important, especially when you're sick. Unfortunately, this is a sick that I've dealt with so many times in the last 2 years, it barely phases me anymore. It's annoying, don't get me wrong, but I've much dealt with worse on this one. There's actually a point where I could not walk around, and it managed to get to my inner ear and completely fucked me up. It was not a fun experience. And I'm talking like, I got out of bed to go to the bathroom, and that's when I found out the hard way what was going on with my body at the time. So I hadn't realized I was sick before then, I just thought I had a head cold or some shit. So that's what they tended to feel like. And, yo, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I got up out of bed, fell right back over. Like, not even a second of just standing there. It was literally up, down. Okay. I'm actually rather surprised with how thick that managed to dry up on the green. I'm sorry, the cyan yellow up here, number 4. There's some wonderfully snotty consistencies, though. That should be a lot of fun if I ever do demon armies and shit. I do orcs from time to time, so that might be fun to add to those too. Oh, or I've got some STLs for monsters to do in the future. So I've been subscribed to Loot Studios for literally over a year now. So I have a whole bunch of STLs and no 3D printer to do stuff with. But plan is to get that soon and start actually printing and doing shit. Just for fun. Plus they do 75mm stuff, so I'll actually be able to do the larger scale shit. And they have some boats that I definitely want to do in the future. Like, they just put out a whole pack of, like, Viking ships and clans, and yeah, I bought those on the spot. I am a sucker for that shit, but so is my dad and one of my cousins, so I know if I ever did it, like, people would probably be asking me for them. Obviously, my dad's getting a gift at some point of that kind of stuff. But, low-key, because I don't think he's ever going to watch this, there's one that was a pirate ship. And I mean, like, the full pirate ship STL, you pop it together, you have the pirates to put on top of it, and I think some different kinds of monsters. And yeah, definite plan in the future is to build the whole thing. Maybe put it in a competition, and then definitely give it to my dad as a gift. Win or not, because I know he'd fucking love that. We're both pirate fans. We literally did a pirate night when I was living with him, when my brother was still alive. Little sad moment there. But we used to make our own homemade grog, and then go watch pirate movies. Pirate movies and shows. And it was so much fun. I actually rather miss doing that. We'd do different things in the grog, because grog is pretty easy to make when you know how to do it. Which I guess I can talk about for a minute here while we're waiting for this to dry. It's starting to get there, but not quite. But easy way to make grog. It is 1/3 rum to 2/3 water with about, was it a 1/4 cup-ish of some kind of citrus or more. I normally just went, okay, whole orange, maybe 2 limes, whatever the fuck I felt like using that time. There was one time where I used grapefruit. Didn't turn out bad, but I always enjoyed doing the blood orange more. Had a different flavor to it, but you had to be careful what spices to add with that, because next on that list, so you've got the water, rubs, your citrus, and then spices. Usually that included brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg. You could add ginger to it. I want to say we experimented with a couple of different things on there. Usually it was how much ginger to cinnamon would make a better flavor. My brother and I were good at doing that kind of stuff and just going all crazy on it. My sister was all scientific about it. And then my dad was definitely the orc way of doing things, which is throw in bottles, see what happens. We are definitely the fuck around and find out family. But we had a lot of fun with it. So, that's something I haven't done in a while. The last time I made grog was actually for a coworker. They thought I was kidding when I said I knew how to make grog, and then I proved them wrong. When he retired, he asked me for another bottle to take with him. I was like, yeah, sure, here you go. Fun times, though. Fun times. And yeah, we'd go through the whole bottle of rum during those visitings. Because we'd make the 3 bottles. Sometimes my little sister would help my dad, sometimes she wouldn't. And then we'd just down the whole fucking things by ourselves. Just share the grog, see who's turned out best, who's turned out the worst. Which, I mean, flavor-wise, my brother had it. It was just so gritty most of the time. Oh, because he put so many spices in there, or the brown sugar wouldn't mix enough, and he had a tendency to put honey in his, too. Which, oh my god, amazing if you put honey in it. But, like, if you didn't use warm water or hot water to actually get everything to dissolve properly in, it just wound up having this really gritty, It had a texture that a drink should not have, we'll put it that way, and it was kind of hard to drink sometimes. Great flavor! Horrible texture. Oy. Yeah, I miss him. He's been gone since 2018. Wow, it got depressing fast. He was a good person. You'll see my sister on here sometimes talking with me about him. But anyway, there's a project I've been thinking about doing. Aside from figuring out how to actually make my own STLs, which God only knows if I'll pull that off. But, you know, that's future plans. If I do, there's one that I want to make of my brother, and I think both my parents will want that one, and probably my aunt and my grandmother. Both of them. Anyway, I'll have to make a lot of copies is what that comes down to. But it'd be pretty cool if I could pull that off. Either way, I've been meaning to paint a picture of him for a couple of years now. Just haven't gotten myself to it yet. Partially, it's just giving myself the time. And the other part is most definitely that it's still hard to look at his pictures, so haven't gotten myself to it yet. Shut up, I'm not crying, you're crying. That got deep within a couple of minutes, what the fuck? So I'll probably wind up doing that on stream if I ever figure it out. Other things that I plan on doing since we have a minute to talk. I kind of want to learn animation. I've been teaching myself using YouTube and my free time at my last job. Which, I mean, I don't have any more, but I'll have more free time at home. Which, huzzah, what the fuck. There's something nice to be said about working 10-hour days, because you get the 3 days off, but, like, if it's not a job where you have a moment to really stop and think and you're just constantly moving, it's kind of tough to really have any time for yourself, especially at home, because, I mean, depending on how far you live away, and most of us live within, like, 30 minutes to an hour away from the job, you had maybe 12 hours at home, 12 hours out and at work, 12 hours at home. But I mean, most of us needed at least 5 to 8 hours of sleep, so that's only 4 hours to yourself. And if you're like me, you get up 2 hours before work, if that. And then, what, you got 2 hours left on the other end? It's not very conducive for a good work-home work/home balance. It has its pluses. Again, the 3 days off is fucking wonderful. I will miss that, and that was a good chunk of keeping me there. It was just that I loved having the 3 days off, and most jobs don't give you that. But I mean, most of the time I would be staying up, because I'd get home at like 5 or 6, because I normally never stayed the full 10 hours, not even gonna lie about it. I didn't. There were a few times I did, and like I wouldn't get home until almost 7. And then I'd stay up until 12 o'clock at night, almost every day, even though I knew I needed to be asleep by then because I got up at like 6. So it was kind of rough on the sleep schedule, because a lot of times I was doing sleep deprivation simply because I wanted to actually work on shit at home and get a proper amount of de-stress time, which, tell you what, sometimes those 6 hours of being home and staying up way later than I should still wasn't enough. And it's a good chunk of why I left one of the shifts too, because holy shit. I fucked myself up with the amount of stress I was going through at one point. Holy shit. So anybody who complains about night shift, I'm like, yeah, no, I feel you. I get it. I get it entirely, especially at that job. It's like nobody gives it the credit it should have, except for like maybe 1 or 2 people that still work there. They're probably not going to be there very long either, so it's just like, yep, that's it. Pushing all your people away. Saw that shit coming though. I'm sorry, this became a therapy session out of nowhere. Hope y'all enjoy the little look into my life. Is that dry yet? Ish? Let's poke it and find out. Oh, nope, that's not dry. How about the inconsistency? No, it's almost there. And you can actually see bits of it are becoming a little bit more translucent. Not a ton, though. It's still carrying a lot of the pigment in those thicker areas, which we thought it might do. So I'm not sure this is going to work. How else can I tint this? Big oof. I am not sure how I can get it to be a thinner consistency that I want without perhaps having to go forward just using a resin, which I don't have currently. I have the 5-minute epoxy, but that's not the same. It's gonna drip and move way more than a UV would if I were to grab it onto something like you see in videos on YouTube. So what they do is they just take like a fishing line, pop a little bit of the UV resin on there with like the color that they're looking for, and then hit it with a UV light to keep it in place and not drip too much. But I definitely don't have the shit for that. How to do this? Banger of a song. The hell is this from? I recognize this one. Yeah, well, just don't say it's really good. If anybody knows what this song is from, please let me know. This is one of the Game Chops remixes. I really enjoy them, but I've also been kind of a sucker for 8-bit songs forever and a fucking day. Like, 8-bit remixes are my life. I love them so much. A good chunk of my alarms are actually 8-bit remixes, because why not wake up on a happy note? So I'm thinking even that's going to be pretty thick. But I do like the cyan yellow down here a lot more. It's the color that we need, but this, as I said, the consistency is still really thick. So the question is, do we put 5 drops of the airflow improver and see how that does? Or do we stick with it and just do the thing? I think, fuck it, let's put the 5 dots of airbrush and flow improver, if I can fucking talk. Let's see how that does. So we're gonna do the tip in. We did learn we can add a little bit more yellow this time. So maybe grab a little bit less blue. Let's see how it turns out. Doot. A bit more yellow there. Cyan pigment is... I find this with a lot of yellows. Their pigmentation is very thin. But it also has a tendency to separate a lot. And I do mean a lot. Okay. so right now we're at about a 70-30. I know this one's Tetris. I used to listen to that all the time. Okay, so 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see how that does. Okay, thick boy is thick. Let's add 2 more. 1, 2. Okay, as far as that goes, I kind of like the coloration here a little bit better. It's definitely a lot less pale as this one down here, but still with a fair amount of the same color, so I think we'd have to use a lot more yellow to get it further off of that. But as far as the thin down parts, though, you can see the yellow pigmentation a bit more in the one up here. So I like that. There's Ben. Ah, put my finger in it. Shit. At least we know. Those two. Those are really neat. I kind of dig these guys, but for a different reason. I think if we were going to do with like different blood colors, those would work really well. Because it still has a slight thin look to it on some of the parts that have dried out a bit more. So you can kind of see through them, but even up here, as you can see with the camo, it still keeps that color really thick. So that could work for like a more muddied water, not like the wet mud. You should get the idea. Like a landslide. That would work really well. Okay, let that dry out a little bit more. At the present moment, it really looks like I'm probably going to wind up using the inks. So we'll go ahead and put the paints away. Just closing that stuff up so that not too much air gets in there and starts ruining the texture. It's the only part about having a big container like that of the texture. If you don't use it a lot and it sits out for too long, it can dry out or at least get crusty on the top. But I haven't had that issue too much with the ones that I have, and I've had them for over a year. So they're pretty good, but I do tend to keep them closed when I'm not using them. So what might need to happen after we do the slime on top of here is I might end up having to go back with the highlight colors, like the yellow or the blue. Maybe? Okay, that's a hard part now that I think about it. Shit. Okay, so fun bit of thought here. When it's actually dripping, like let's say from the hand here, depending on where the light's coming from is where the highlight's going to be. So I could do one side of the highlight blue on one side, yellow on the other side, and only do a small dot coming off of whatever is dripping if it's large enough. If it's small, like just a little dot, then I really don't see a need to do that, because I feel like that might take away from everything. But that's something we can test out as we go. Might not see the full finished product here on stream, but you can find the finished pictures on my Facebook page when I post them, which will be within a week of finishing it off. But I really do dig how this one came out. It turned out really nice, I think. All things considered. I could have done a little bit more bounce on the top of the yellow coming down from the top of the tunnel, but I rather like how it looks when you see it from the top, where it's a little more even split. But there's just a little bit of that bounce coming over top. I feel like that turned out really good. And then the middle parts, where the two legs mix together, turned out pretty good too. They didn't get too muddied in color, which can be a pretty hard thing to do when you're using complementary colors like this. It's not full complementary colors, but I did use orange and blue, which are going to pop against each other. But the yellow highlight definitely does help to cut things off a little bit more. How do we look? Okay. So 8 is definitely having more of the Yeah, it carries more of the green than 7 does, where it does look like a snot green, but it's definitely more pale. Now honestly, I'm just waiting for this middle part here to dry, because I've got a good comparison down here in 7, where it's dried, and you can see it's somewhat translucent, but still not a ton. So I'm just gonna wait for this little snot trail right there to dry up. And if it's translucent enough, that's what we're gonna go with. I think that's probably the one I'm gonna go with anyway, because it's got more of the look that I'm going for. As much as I like 7, I feel like the color of 8 is gonna work a little bit better. And there's no parts on the miniature where we're gonna really get this thick here. It'll be more thin trails like the stuff that we see in here in this section. I really feel like that might work a lot better. Reason I'm not going to go too thick and get any thick parts like that is that over top of the paint job means that I'd have to go back and color correct it, which means going over the highlight colors over top of that. And I'm really not interested in doing that, whereas this over top of the paint job will add more of the green tint to where it already is. And having it in those hanging spots, again, we can go over with the highlights for that one when it dries. No big problem. And that'll really work out. Yep. Well, that was a fun thought process. Thank you for jumping along with me on this one. And going through this little bit of experimentation with me. Nice part is now we know how we can get some really great textures for doing, for instance, snot, barf, muddied water, bloods, a little bit easier without having to use UV resin, which I'm okay with that. Nothing against UV resin, I just don't. I'll be honest, I don't feel like doing that. I'm good. I like my water effect, and if I can figure out how to do it with the stuff that I already have, even better. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can get the camera to close in on this. Give me a moment. Because as it dries in number 7, let's see about getting closer. As you can see here at some of the parts of number 7, as it started to dry, well, let's see if I can get it back in focus. Here we are. You can see where it went a little translucent, and you can see the grit of the palette, or the, not palette. Nope, the words escaped me, fuck it. You can see the fabric underneath, and you can actually see where the shade naturally hits it through the light. But it still holds onto the pigment in some of these thicker areas, while still seeming like the pigment drooped in one direction. There we go. And it did that a little bit up here in these spots, but it kept the pigment really well in any thicker area than where it's literally brought out to its thinnest point. Whereas here, you've got some of that pigment pooling in towards the deepest spots, but you can still see through it, which I find really interesting. Whereas up here, with number 8, it's starting to have that effect on some of the parts like up here, where it's doing the same thing in some of the finished parts, but those thick parts are staying thick enough that we can't fully see through them, but you can start to see through this area right here. Especially like that. Whereas with up here in the shades, again, with the thinnest parts you can see through it, but the thicker parts did not take any of that translucency. They stayed super thick. But interesting thought train. If I were to use the water effect, and I wanted to do something like a deep sea base, I could easily do my usual of the Coeli and the Biltan mixed together. And those darkest parts, if I were to put those specifically in areas where I wanted it to look like it drops suddenly like down a hole or a crevasse, that would create a really cool optical illusion on a flat base. I think that would be really neat. So now we have a way of doing that, because if I did that underneath the water effect, I think that would work out perfectly, because you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between those and the water that's above it. Or, well, water. I think that would be really neat. Okay, so now we have some ideas. I've always wanted to do some deep sea bases, so that's actually right up my alley on that one. So the question is, do we use 7 or do we use 8? I think as much as 8 comes out with more of the color, 7's consistency is more what we're looking for. Because I want it to grip onto certain parts but still be really thin in others, and I think that'll look better with what we have so far. So we're going to do the half-half ink, and then do 4 drops of the AF, and start applying it that way. So let's go ahead and do our alarm view again. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Keeping up with my friends' chat, making sure what we're doing later today is still good. How to get this mix? Because I'll need a little bit more than what I was making there. I'd be wary you will only have a certain amount of time to use this for. I could drop it on the wet palette. I honestly don't know what kind of an effect it'll have on it, so I'm not going to do that today. Maybe another time. Anyway, I'm going to do one solid drop of the yellow. One solid drop of blue. And then we're going to drop, let's be honest, that's a lot more than the initial. So I'm thinking about half the dropper's worth. And start praying that this works. But I'll know since I looked at it before. God, that looks neat though. See, that's what makes doing drip painting cool, is you see how the paints want to mix together just straight out. It is a lot of fun. Anyway, since I got to see it before and how it reacted, once I get this mixed together, I'll know if I need more of the airflow improver. Yeah, we're gonna need a little bit more. So that's still a little too thick. Just 3 drops more, let's see how it does. Since I added more of the yellow ink, I'm going to add more of the airflow improver. Okay. Wow, I apparently splashed that everywhere. Sorry, keyboard. Alright. Water effect. I'm probably better off taking the sculpting tool for this. I'm just scoop out a chunk, slap that right down. And then I'm going to mix them together straight out. Consistency things seems a little thick, so I'm going to go ahead and just straight up mix some of the airflow improver straight into what we have mixed together so far. Okay, here comes the terrorizing part. We're gonna go ahead and start using it. Alright. Shit, part is once it's on there, there is no taking it back off. So for this part I am going to have to work fairly fucking fast, as this is going to want to dry as I'm working, which once it dries out I cannot use it anymore and I'm not going to be able to move it. So, move it or lose it. just curve this up a little bit because I realize you guys can't see much here. There we go. So the biggest thing to remember when you're doing this is the water effect at its thinnest is just going to look like wet lines, which is good. The thicker parts are going to be this green, which I think on the back side is really neat. On the front side, it actually molds in pretty well with the yellow, so thankfully nothing's going to get taken away here. We just are going to have to do our thicker parts with some care. So things to remember, there's pool points where you're going to have more and you're going to want to put more because it'll look more, more like gravity taking effect on the ooze. For instance, like pulling around the feet, like what we did there. I'm going to do it around this foot too in a minute. Obviously the drip points, which will be coming off of this boy and the bad boy of the fingers. The bitch of this is I've only got so long to work before this starts to get too thick, and pulling it out and getting it to loosen is going to be a bitch. So I can't really overthink this stuff. I've just kind of got to go with it and hope it works out. It's a great exercise and fuck you, get it done. Okay, I'm gonna exercise my not too much gene and stop touching it. I lied, I'm gonna touch it in one spot. Only because that's gonna look fucking sick when it dries. Okay. There's only a couple of spots I think I want to add a little bit more to, at least on the top here. And I'm not gonna lie, cleaning off today probably gonna be a bitch, so once this is done, I'm gonna go ahead and call the video quits. And start getting a head start on trying to get this tile clean, because, yeah, it's gonna take a hot minute. But I gotta give that consistency worked out just right, because you can see it wet, and the parts where it's thick really grab the view for the green. So if anything, I might touch them up a little bit with some of the highlight colors, but I kind of like that they stand out just that much more. so I'm gonna go ahead and let it dry here. I'm gonna clean this bitch off. And, guys, I'm probably not gonna be back again today. But thank you for joining me. I hope you learned something. I hope you have fun using this technique yourself in the future. If you ever have your hands on some water effects and your own paints and whatnot, give this a try. I definitely say it was worth it, given how this has turned out so far. And this isn't even fully cured. I really think when it's done, it'll look really fucking fantastic, because even where it is starting to dry, you can see the lines without it taking away from the original color work, which I really dig, because it really draws more on the creature and the different parts of the sculpt by having those active lines from the slime running around everywhere. Think of anything. Yep. Okay. So, not gonna lie, cleaning this off, I'm probably gonna wind up having to use some green stuff. Or, I'm sorry, the, green cleaner to try to get this to unsoak. Definitely gonna have to scrape that off first. Do not send that down your drain, you'll fuck it up. So, just things to be worried about when you're cleaning this kind of stuff off. Don't just willy-nilly send it all down the drain. You are going to fuck up your drainage system when you do it. But anyway, I think I am going to go ahead and call it here, guys, because if I touch it anymore, I know I'm going to fuck it up. And adding anything else to it really is not going to I don't think it really enhanced much more of anything else, but I will be hitting it with a gloss varnish to really give it that wet look even more. Well, yeah, by this point, because I would have to. Otherwise, it will ruin the slime trails. But anyway, so here's what we learned today. You can make slime out of water effect. And if done right, it looks pretty fucking cool. Alright guys, check out the finished product and the finished pictures on Facebook. They'll be posted sometime during the later half of this week. I'm gonna clean up, and y'all have a wonderful day. I will be back next week. Definitely Wednesday, our usual time, 12 o'clock. The week after that is when I'll be starting up the new schedule. Keep an eye out for that. But next week we'll be starting up on our next commission project, which will be some medieval fantasy style houses, and just working on bases for a game. But alright guys, it's been fun. This is the end of John Carpenter's The Thing. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.